The banner over Main Street flapped in the wind. "Welcome home, Sergeant Luke Dawson." But Luke didn't look up. His boots hit the cracked pavement in slow, heavy steps. The cheers around him blurred into background noise, the kind that came from somewhere far away, like a radio left on in another room. He wasn't used to noise anymore. Out there, silence meant safety. As he passed the crowd, people waved flags and held up signs, but Luke just nodded faintly. His eyes, deep and shadowed with sleepless nights, moved toward the old war memorial at the corner of the square. He stopped there. For a moment, he stared at the bronze names of men who never came home, and his breath caught. He'd promised one of them he'd bring something back. And now, it was time. That morning, before the parade, Luke had driven his battered pickup through the mist, back toward the woods just outside town. The backseat was filled with things he hadn't been able to leave behind: a torn uniform patch, a rusted dog tag, and a folded piece of paper that still smelled faintly of diesel and desert sand. He pulled over near the clearing where he and his best friend, Corporal James Turner, used to fish before they enlisted. Luke got out, the cold air biting at his face. He stood there for a long time, staring at the water, remembering the promise he'd made. "If one of us doesn't make it back," James had said, grinning like he always did, "the other better tell the story right." Luke had laughed back then. Neither of them thought it would come to that. But now, standing there alone, Luke unfolded the letter James had written before their final mission. A letter he'd never had the heart to read until today. "If you're reading this, Luke, then I didn't make it. Tell my mom I wasn't scared. Tell her I thought of her when the sun came up that last morning. And tell her you did what I couldn't. You came home. So live for me, brother. Don't disappear into silence like some do. Promise me that." Luke pressed the letter against his chest, his jaw tightening. He could still hear James's voice in his head, that easy laugh, that stubborn hope. Then he took out the small wooden box he'd carried since the day James fell. Inside it was a silver medal, James's Medal of Honor, posthumously awarded for saving his unit. Luke had received it on James's behalf overseas, but he knew where it belonged. He walked down to the water's edge and set the box on the stone they'd carved their initials into years ago. The river moved quietly beneath the gray morning light. "You were the brave one, James," he whispered. "I just followed your lead." By noon, the town was gathered in the square for the parade. Luke hadn't planned to attend. But when Mrs. Turner, James's mother, came up the driveway holding that same invitation, her trembling hands clutching the paper, Luke couldn't refuse. "James would have wanted you there," she said softly. "He always looked up to you, Luke," he nodded. "I'll be there, ma'am." So now, as the crowd cheered, Luke stood by the memorial, eyes fixed on the bronze plate. Then Mrs. Turner, frail but strong in spirit, took his hand. When the mayor called Luke to the podium, the applause was deafening, but he didn't smile. He took the microphone and said quietly, "I don't deserve this welcome. The real hero isn't here today." The crowd went silent. Even the flags seemed to stop moving. He reached into his jacket and held up the empty box. James's medal no longer inside. "Corporal James Turner saved 6 men when our convoy was ambushed. I brought home his medal, but I left it where it belongs and at the river we used to fish as kids." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some of the older veterans saluted silently. Mrs. Turner's eyes filled with tears, her lips trembling in both grief and pride. Luke continued, voice steady but heavy. "You all call me a hero, but I'm just someone who made it home. The heroes, they're the ones who didn't." He stepped back from the podium, unable to say more. The crowd began to clap again, slowly this time, not in celebration, but in respect. One by one, people stood. The local band stopped playing, and in the stillness, everyone in town rose to their feet. Luke looked around, at the faces of people he'd grown up with, at kids waving flags who would never know the weight of a rifle, at mothers clutching photos of sons. For the first time since he returned, he let the silence settle inside him. Not the kind that haunted him, but the kind that healed. That evening, Luke drove back to the river. The sunset painted the sky in streaks of gold and crimson. He knelt by the stone again, J+L, carved by two reckless teenagers long ago. The metal's silver edge glinted faintly in the fading light. He smiled, just a little. "You got your story told, James," he murmured. "And I think I'm ready to live again." The wind moved gently through the trees, carrying the distant sound of church bells from town. Luke closed his eyes, feeling for the first time in years that the world was finally at peace.